Okay, so what I did for you is I put out these 2 pages. They have the beginning, pretty much the beginning and the end of the book of Job. And I'll repeat the joke that I love about Job. It's not a joke, it's really true.
It's not a joke.
It's not actually a joke, it's true. That, that we have on Shavuos night, we say Tikkun Leil Shavuot. And the Tikkun that we say is really like Tikkun. Tikkun in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, means to, means to fix something, to rectify something. But you all know from our classes that Tikkun also means to enclose something, to adorn it. So what are we doing? We're adorning the Torah, or adorning the bride who's coming now to be wed with Hashem, with the Torah, right? The bride is us, the Jewish people, and the groom is Hashem. And Shavuot is until now, we haven't progressed to the next level yet, but until now it's been a erusin, meaning a betrothal, but it's not the final marriage. But when you are mikadosh a woman, you have to give her something. So what did Hashem give us? He gave us the Torah. That's his wedding ring, if you want. So how do we adorn ourselves? By wearing it, by taking this wedding ring and putting it on our finger. So how do we do that with the Torah? So we come with the entire Torah to Shavuot morning. How can you learn the entire Torah in one night? So the Eitzah was that you say the first 3 verses and the last 3 verses of every parsha in the Chumash, and the first 3 verses and the last 3 verses of every one of the rest of the books of the Tanakh. So altogether, that part doesn't take that much. Really, that part takes about 20 minutes. And then, over the years, more and more was added. So you say Taryag Mitzvot, and there's a whole long section from the Zohar that you say, and many other things. Okay? So, when we do this, when we say the first 3 verses and the last 3 verses of each book, you get a different perspective on each book, on each parsha and on each book. So first of all, I recommend doing it. It's not that long, just doing that part. It's about 20 minutes. Who gains the most? I think I've said this before. Who gains the most from just reading the first 3 verses of his book and the last 3 verses? So it seems that the person who gains the most is Job, right? Eov. Because, how does it start? So let's read the first 3 verses. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all men of the East. Those are the first 3 verses. Now you know what happens after that, right? It gets pretty, but we don't read it. So what do we read? We read the end. The end is, right, from verse 15, 42:15, and in all the land were no woman found so fair as the daughters of Job, and their father gave their inheritance among their brethren. After this lived Job 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. What a wonderful story. So nobody gains as much as does Eov from Shavuot night. Okay? Because in Shavuos, there's something special that even Eov can have a lot of nachas from his life, and everything's fine. Okay, so that's it's a joke, but it's not really a joke. It's really the Shavuos somehow fixes even the worst, the worst possible life. What we started last time is that we said that there's no book in the Tanakh that's more therapeutic than Eov, because that's exactly what's going on. The person has trouble, and people come to help him, and they give him advice, and eventually he comes out of it. Right? Does he come out of it because of the advice? No, but he comes out of it. Eventually he ends up in a much better place than where he was when the problem started. So what can we take from Eov when it comes to therapy? So the thing we're going to concentrate on today is a global picture of what's going on in Eov. Okay, what is the real theme? I have to tell you that when I don't phrase these things in modern terms, I don't get them. Like I can read a million Perushim, but if I don't try to rephrase it the way I would say it today, there's sort of like dissonance from what was being said. So today, we have this thing called scholarship, which is a strange thing. You can be very anti-Torah and can be very revealing. It really depends on how you do it. So Eov was always considered part of the 3 books of wisdom. Right? What are the 3 books of wisdom? Kohelet, and Eov, and Mishlei. Not Tehillim. Tehillim is not exactly the books of wisdom. Tehillim is songs. It has a lot of wisdom, but it's not the same idea. These 3 books, Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, and Job, and Proverbs, they're books of wisdom. How do you gain wisdom? How does a person become wise? Even if I just ask somebody on the street, how do you become wise? So what would they say, I think? Most people would agree. It comes from experience, right? What is that called? En chacham keban nisayon. There's nobody who is as wise as a person who has experience. And we've talked about this in the past, that in Yiddishkeit really there are 2 concepts of wisdom. There's the concept of wisdom that is gained through experience, en chacham keban nisayon. But there's also a concept of wisdom, which is wisdom that is close to prophecy. And that's called Ezu Chacham Haroeh et Hanolad, a person who can see the world coming into being. He sees things being born. He sees as if beforehand. He can see how it's happening. He sees what's underlying everything. There are 2 very different forms of wisdom. It's very hard even to compare them. The one that's called En Chacham Keban Nisayon, when you learn from experience, that's what we call today empiricism. You go through the world, you experiment, you see what happens, and then you come to conclusions. And then you test them, you see whether it happens the same way the next time. And you come to all kinds of understandings. You need a lot of time to get to that, yeah? You need a lot of wisdom. But there's another type of wisdom, this wisdom that is close to prophecy, and there it's not dependent on time. And it's not dependent on how much experience a person has. It's dependent on something else. About this type of wisdom, Chazal say a very important thing, which is confused with the other type of wisdom. They say, the yir'ah tara lechokhmah, that fear, in the sense, awe of Shamayim, right, yirat Shamayim, is the entranceway, is the hallway to wisdom. That this type of wisdom is dependent on a person's yira. It's not dependent on how much experience he has. Yir'ah tara lechokhmah. That's how it says in the Gemara. Tara is a sha'ar in Aramaic. Taf reish ayin aleph. Whereas in Mishlei he says, Reshit chokhmah yir'at Hashem. Right? That's the pasuk that it's based on. That if you want to come to this prophetic form of wisdom, you have to have the Reshit of chokhmah, the beginning of this type of wisdom, is Yirat Shamayim, Yirat Hashem. Okay. The problem is that when we say Yir'ah, there are 2 completely different types of Yir'ah that people think about. And one of them is, in the same way, that I imagine yourself now standing at the edge of this mirpeset here, and there's no rail, and look down. That's fear. You get fear from that. Right? Because I'll fall off and I'll hurt myself or I'll die. Right away there's fear. What am I afraid of here? I'm afraid of something that's evident. It's obvious. There's no escaping it. This is what it is. It's a law of nature. That if I fall off the mirpeset here, something's going to happen to me. It's not going to be good. I feel it if I come close, even if there is a railing, even if there is everything, I still come close to it. I can imagine, right, that feeling. That's the first type of yira. That yira is actually, again, in many ways, it's a product of experience. Meaning I've seen things fall. And then I can imagine myself falling. Okay, but if I never saw something fall, or, for instance, a child who doesn't know that electricity is dangerous, they've never seen a person look like a skeleton in I don't know, like when they're being electrocuted. So you have to warn them, and you have to explain to them, and you have to show them something, so they have some kind of experience, so they understand that this is a negative thing.
I always take a watermelon and throw it off the balcony to show my kids.
That's a perfect example, and it's nice and red on the inside, and you get an idea of what's going on.
That's dramatic. Didn't have it under the school.
But guess what? They're not going to jump off Mirpeset.
I never had anything. Never. No solar came under the window. Does they know what happened?
Okay. Except that is the lower form of ira. That's the ira tata, it's called. It's a fear of what will happen to me. Okay. And it's a fear not of the unknown, but rather of the very well-known, something that I'm very familiar with. Except that I may have not experienced it, but I don't need to experience it because I've had some experience that was close enough to it, and then I understand what would happen to myself. Sometimes it's just imagination, but still it's fear of something that's known, something that I can imagine, that I have some concept of. Okay? I told you, I think a few times, I have this fear of aliens, right? So I used to have it at least. So what am I afraid of? I've never seen an alien, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. The alien for me is the monster. And monsters, I know what they do, right? They eat your head off and whatever they do, right? Because that's what they do. That's how they do it. Except they do it in terrible ways. Except, by the way, right? Aliens. I think we talked about this once, but the aliens are the modern form of monsters because they're related to technology. Really, it's a fear of technology. That's what it is in the end. It's a fear that technology is going to devour you. But in any case, getting back to our topic, the higher form of wisdom, which is close to prophecy, is not gained through experience. It cannot be gained by any experience. Meaning, it's not even vicariously. It's not even seeing somebody else experience something. It won't come from a watermelon or anything like that. It's rather, and this will be the point that we'll see now in Eov in length, it's the inability to understand, not the ability to understand.
So it's the fear of not understanding.
No, it's as we'll see, it's not fear in the sense of trepidation necessarily, of shivering and being afraid. It's fear in the sense of awe of the unknowable. But the unknowable, not in the unknowable because I haven't grown enough yet, but regardless of what I've experienced, in the end, I don't understand. I don't understand what is going on.
And this is the kind of fear that leads to Horet on the left.
To that, right.
To that kind of
Right.
To what?
To seeing creation happening. It's that understanding. We'll say it in terms of Avram Avinu, he went through all the different laws, all the different possible laws, as a very young child apparently. There's different opinions. Rambam has one opinion, the Midrash says something else. But he went through all the possibilities of how to understand the world, and eventually understood that as much as I understand what I can understand, that's not God. That Hashem is always beyond my understanding. And that's where his yira starts. Meaning, even though we tend to think of Avram as Avraham Moavi, as the one who loves Hashem, the whole love, the whole prophetic ability to hear Lech Lecha, to be able to hear that, starts from the fact that he first of all has awe of Hashem. And he understands that it's not the moon, it's not the sun, it's none of these natural laws. It's something that's far beyond any of this. Now, theoretically you could come to this from scientific inquiry. But most people are not scientists, and most people don't study nature, and they don't study life. So the way that most people come to this is unfortunately through not understanding their own lives. That's where it comes from. Meaning you have to reach a certain impasse, a certain inability to make sense of it all. And when you reach that inability to make sense of it all, that's the beginning of real yira. That's the beginning of real awe of God. That beyond all the explanations that I have, there's some kind of other logic going on here that I can't understand. Now, one of the places where this logic is really convoluted and really complex, and I've read a lot of material on this, And sometime maybe we'll have a share just to try to explain all the different opinions. But how does Hashem judge the world? It's one of the biggest issues. And a lot of times Eov is understood as a book that's trying to deal with that issue. And what I'm going to show you today is that it's not trying to deal with that issue at all. It's just using that issue to introduce or to give a background that's strong enough to introduce this sense of unknowability of God. The inability of the human mind to wrap itself around how Hashem functions or how Hashem runs the world. That sugya, that issue of how Hashem judges, is just one of the more difficult issues, that's all. But it's not the point. He's not trying to answer it or not answer it. In fact, in the end he says there is no answer. I can't tell you why. There's a tradition that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote this. And that it says in the Gemara that the Moshe Rabbeinu also had this question about Tzadik Veralo and Rasha Batovlo. But you have to understand that people of the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, who has tremendous yira, and we say that, right, what does he say? Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mi imach, ki im li yira et Hashem Elokecha. What does God demand of you except for one thing? He only wants one thing, that you have awe of Him, this yira, come to the wisdom of Moshe Rabbeinu through it. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the opening to that wisdom. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, the question of Tzadik Veralo and Rasha V'Tovlo is not a question that's a philosophical question in the sense of, or call it an ethical question, how dare you Hashem do so and so. It's a question that he's using in order to come to his wisdom. It's a question that every time he thinks he's figured it out, he comes and asks, no, can I answer this question already? Do I know why Hashem does it this way and not that way? And quickly comes to the limits of his ability to understand. How is all this related to therapy? I'll just finish this one idea. That one of the first things that happens to a person in a moment of difficulty, of real difficulty, and that's why he's turning to somebody else, is that he's confounded. They don't know what to do. They can't make sense of it. If a therapist right away offers an explanation, sometimes he's doing a disservice. He or she is doing a disservice. Because the first reason for why you're in this situation is so that you have fear. And again, not this fear of trepidation, but this understanding of your limits. Understanding that if Hashem is giving this to me now, it's because I feel I've got it right, figured out, under control. I know how to hold Him in place. I know how to run my world. I know how to make it function. And it's not because it's a sin to do that. It's because you're losing yourself in the details. You're losing yourself in some kind of constant life that never is able to take the next step, that's never able to go beyond where it is now. It can't see, in another sense, it can't see that I'm always being reborn into something new. And so I have to come to some wall, brick wall that I hit, and I say, wow, I really don't understand what's going on. I really can't make sense of it. Again, people don't move. We don't move, simply can't move psychologically, emotionally, unless, unfortunately, or most of the time, unless we come to these impasses, these feelings of utter helplessness. And that helplessness is actually the remedy, not something that needs to be cured. And the book of Job revolves around this issue. The first three companions of Job that come to him try to remedy the helplessness by explaining to him that he's really not helpless. And we'll see what that means as we go on. Elihu ben Brachel, the fourth young man who comes, and we'll see that he starts out by saying, I thought that years would answer here, meaning that the experience of a lifetime of these elders would be able to answer you, but I see that years don't help. He gives the completely different answer, which is, you don't know. We'll see in a moment how he says that. It's a very interesting way, the way he says it. But that ability to stand, to be in the place of the helplessness, is actually the remedy for what's going on. And it's one of the things that again, I'm the advocate for for the person who's coming to me. So towards Hashem, I say, give it to him in a different way. But towards the person himself, there's a feeling of utter helplessness. I can't take that away by saying there's a simple solution to what you're saying, to what your issue is. I have to also help him or her. A friend of mine has this phrase, own it, but in Hebrew it's litatzeh mimzeh. It's not to be afraid of that place of helplessness, and to understand that that place of helplessness is what's going to get you out of where you're stuck, because that's the whole point. And if I take that away too early, it's sort of like how they understand now in education. This has become there's a lot of stuff done this way now, that it's more important to put children with problems that they can't solve so easily than it is to teach them just how to solve problems, right? It's not just rote repetition of the same problems solving principles that I taught you. I have to give you actual problems that are really difficult and let you stand there. Stand in the question. Be able to stand there. And when you are able to stand there for a while, things begin to come to you that wouldn't come through my instruction. And in fact, you might be able to figure out a solution that I would never have taught you, because that's what it means, that type of wisdom that is close to prophecy and is personal. And it could be that you have this other way of dealing with this that I could never imagine. So the book of Iyov really is a lot about being able to stand in that place. Okay, but to see it in the pshat, we're going to have to really get into it to see the actual words.
This is exactly
okay.
what...
So that's the introduction, and now we can...
No, it's not what I was going to say before, but this is exactly the approach that the American chaplaincy movement teaches, that you never provide solutions for the patient.
That's also not right.
No, but it works. You come in just walking with them. The minute you meet them where they are and you give space for what they begin to provide solutions.
Okay.
It works every time. They start saying, I didn't even have those solutions. Why is that not good? I think it's amazing.
Unfortunately,
but it works.
Unfortunately, a person is also blind. That's why you're objective.
You trigger them, but you don't provide
okay,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
No, what you're saying is, even if I know what the solution is, if I say it, it doesn't help. They've got to say it themselves. But since, again, I said I'm their advocate, so I have no interest in them suffering. I have no interest at all.
But your greatest interest is that they find a solution themselves.
No, so if I can shorten the process, and that's what I'm trying to do, or at least to the best of my understanding, I'm shortening the process for them to come. Because from the side you see things, you don't have to be a genius, you just see it from the side, it's very clear. Yeah. Why? Because I don't have your ego, I don't have your issue with your ego. So I see it very clearly. And somebody that I'm doing long distance now with, even though I promised myself I'd never do it again, but I'm doing long distance again. So he wrote to me before Shabbos, he said, I thought you would write something like that. So I wrote him back, no, you see, you don't need me anymore. You can say what I say anyway. So you don't need me anymore. That's exactly where I wanted you to come. But the truth is that it's not completely true, because even what I said then is not the whole story. That part he already heard enough times that he's repeating it. I don't know if he's really there yet. And there's other parts that he still doesn't get, because the Sunday he writes me and it's a complete new thing.
It's a process.
Okay.
I'm stuck on something. I think that a lot of people who learn a lot or have wise people around them, they're not stuck on trying to understand God's ways that he gave them challenges. They've got that down. It's not for them to understand. They get that. Mm-hmm. It's how to cope. And that's why they go and get help. Mm-hmm. So was Iyov really looking for his people to say, to appease him and let I don't think he was looking for that. That wasn't helpful. And he's not looking to say, we know, it is all for good. I think he knew that. He was a tzaddik. So I'm not understanding, what's the big hurrah over here?
Okay. So you said it yourself in the first sentence.
Okay,
The people who have been... no, sorry. The people who have been around the wise people and so on have got that down. That's exactly the problem. The moment that you have it down, and it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter if it's a picture of Hashem as sporadic, unpredictable, or whether it's a picture of Hashem as answering your every whim because A, B, C, and D. The intellect can understand that there's what I don't understand yet, but the psyche has a completely different problem with it. Human beings need patterns. They need consistency. And so it doesn't matter how you picture
If
Hashem.
there's something very drastic, you know you're not going to get that answer.
No, I agree with her.
So what's wrong with saying you got that down?
Because that's wrong. Because you
want
do
me
need
to
an answer.
constantly question what happened in my life? I'm not
Yes,
going to.
yes.
Well, every day?
Not in the sense
How would I
of,
survive?
no, not in the sense of what happened in the past, but what's happening now. What is Hashem
Well,
telling me
that
now?
means someone had to let go very easily what happened in their past, because that was the challenge.
Right.
No one's having a recurring
Right.
challenge every moment. God forbid they shouldn't.
No, but there's a new challenge every moment. And if I cope with every single challenge the same way I coped with the previous ones, and I haven't gone anywhere. Hashem is constantly speaking. Hashem is infinite. So as He's guiding me through my life, there are changes, huge changes. It could be in play. And if I answer every challenge the same way that I answered the previous ones, I'm missing out on what it's supposed to do for
You
me.
don't have to be broken just because you're going to find a new way to deal with this challenge.
First of all, I don't agree with that. You can be broken and whole at the same time. That's the whole
I
issue.
think you're describing a
Right,
person
but
who's
you
got
have
shattered,
tools.
who's just...
You have tools.
To continue, so you'll never react, God forbid it should happen again, you would never react the same way, but different things come your way, and at least now you have some tools.
Right, you have tools,
Doesn't mean you're-
but don't turn the tools into any kind of Torah.
But the overarching Torah is that God is beyond me. What's wrong with that? That's
Nachon,
not
but
blocking it.
like I said, that's an intellectual understanding.
But you
To
said that's a challenge.
to transform that into the way I live my life is a whole different process.
But anytime I need that, it will come up first because
Okay,
I already know.
right, and therefore you're able to help yourself.
So now you're saying
But
that's
there are
wrong.
moments where you're broken still because what happens is beyond the tools that you've collected until now.
Right, but I'm going to keep going back to that overarching concept that God is beyond me.
Except-
That's going to pick me up every time.
I hope so.
Well,
No, but you-
because what else would I find?
So-
There's no second God I'm going to find.
No, but you said therein lies the problem.
That's exactly the point.
But
Then
you said
you're
that's
going to
the
change your conception of Hashem.
He's always going to remain beyond me, though.
Still, what you call beyond you changes from time to time.
What that means.
But okay, so in the same way that a yeshiva bacher has a picture, or any single person, but especially a yeshiva bacher has a picture of what Hashem is. It's very easy. You got to wake up early. You learn Chassidus before you daven, and you daven with a lot of intensity, and then you learn. And
That's not Hashem
there's
is beyond you. You've totally fixed God into some black and white.
Can. And then he gets married, and suddenly, how could you say that this is Hashem? How could you say that having to spend time listening to the berating is Hashem? How could you say that? But the Alter Rebbe says that's a Shekhinah talking to you. How can you say that's Hashem? You can't understand. Look at different transitions in people's lives in the same way that death also is one of those big things, or maybe the biggest thing, that people can't get over. Well, Hashem is also this. How can you say that? It's not. Hashem is the opposite. He's life. Said it right now. He's showing you a certain aspect.
That I understand, but what I'm saying is that
You
if you know that God is beyond you, then He can be death, He can be Holocaust, He can be marriage, He can be danger, He can be everything. Doesn't matter.
And here comes the Rebbe and says, don't tell me that the Holocaust is Hashem. Don't tell me that, because any principle that you'll use to explain the Rebbe.
That you can't say Hashem was behind the Holocaust.
Okay? How can you say? Because any
Is
principle,
other than God?
no, that any principle that we know about Hashem cannot explain this.
You can't explain it.
So where do we stand in a place that I can't explain, period? Not in the place where that's the explanation.
Because that is Hashem.
It's a fine.
You're using, I can't explain him as an explanation. Okay?
Yeah.
You're using he's beyond my capacity as an explanation. That's also an explanation.
So
When
you
I
feel
say,
like,
You're not
Vayidom Aaron, that's exactly what it's called.
it seems like
It's
Yeah, but like that's just a play on words. Because if Hashem
if
is power of the
because
Holocaust, there's the devil.
because we're talking intellectually here, but when a person has to face agony and sorrow at a level that leaves them incapacitated, then that incapacitation, that's Hashem. And that's Vayidom Aaron. He can't do.
Hashem doesn't want you to stay there.
He doesn't want you to stay there, but that's the opening to the next level.
to then foresee to see.
It's something that's going, if you accept it, if you take it in, if you mitatzem with it, I don't know how to say it in English, but
Power?
you become one with it. You accept it, that this is how Hashem is talking to me now.
Like you said.
Yeah, I don't like that word because it means, again, it's exactly the opposite.
Embrace.
Litatzem is it's like embrace it. It's like to become one with it. And then you begin to go through the change that this energy will make happen in you. Okay. So we're jumping a little bit the gun because we're, like I said, I'm phrasing it in modern terms, and I don't want to do it now, but next time that we'll talk about it, I'll explain the whole. There's a whole theory behind this also. It's not just a Torah theory; it's an academic theory about these books of Kohelet and Eov and Mishlei. They're part of what I said. They're called wisdom literature, and there's wisdom literature everywhere. It's not just in Yiddishkeit. And Chazal even had this problem with Kohelet at the end, that they said that there was even an idea that the last two verses were stuck on it to save it, to allow it to go into the Tanakh. But really, the whole book is just terrible. Why? Because it's despair, despair, despair. Kohelet. What are the two last verses there? Sof davar hakol nishma. In the end, everything is heard. Et ha'elokim yirav et mitzvotav shmo. Fear God, this yira that we're talking about, and sometimes not understood properly. Vet mitzvotav shmo, and keep His commandments. Ki zeh kol ha'adam. Because this is all of man. This is what man is about. So it seems to be like such a out of place with the rest of the book. The people think there was even an idea like that brought in Chazal, that this was latched on, it was stuck on to the end of the book, so to make it connected somehow to religion. But it's not. That's the point of the book. And we'll talk more about it, because most of the problems that people come with, or a lot of them, talking about here not only despair from illness or from some calamity that struck or whatever it is, it's also despair from human relationships, from my closest relationships. That despair, that you have to understand, in the rest of the world, this was considered to be the highest level of being alive. That's why it's called wisdom literature. It leads you to wisdom. So we'll see how the Torah is very different in this respect. It doesn't leave it like that. It's what we call asceticism. You know what asceticism is? Sigufin. That a person is mistagef. He's an ascetic, means he removes himself from all human relationships, from all physical needs and pleasures, and that was considered the path to wisdom. And the Torah says no, that's not. Especially the Baal Shem Tov, as we'll see, he completely rejects that. And he says it's about something else altogether.
What does it mean in Pirkei Avot when it says "Chayei tzar tifir"?
So we'll see. You have to It's true that they used to understand the Chayei tzar means that you should not touch the physical world. But the Baal Shem Tov comes and says that it can't be true, because Hashem didn't create this physical world for nothing. In fact, we see in Chazal that if you didn't enjoy a fruit, they'll pass judgment on you in the world to come. So how can you tell me I'm not supposed to enjoy the world? I have to enjoy the world. So where is the sorrow? Where is the asceticism? So I'll give the preview. But the preview is simply that the Baal Shem Tov understood that it has to do with your ego. It's not with the world, it's with your enjoyment of yourself in the sense of Yeshut. That you have to get rid of. Stop enjoying it. That's why I hate.
Stop enjoying yourself.
Right. Stop being in love with yourself. Stop. That's the fruit that you're eating all the time that's killing you. And you don't realize it. About that, you have to be ascetic. Be ascetic to the sense of self.
Well, that also happens with spiritual.
So we'll talk about it more. But this is all related to Shavuos. Why is this really? First of all, because of what we said about Eov. But the entire Torah was given, that's how Chazal describe it, it was given mipi gvura. It was given in the sense of awe, not in the sense of understanding out of love. Love is being close to something. Awe is being far from something. And the entire point of life is to understand, again, in the process of growth, is that I'm very far from being anything. I don't understand, but more importantly, I can't count even on my understanding of myself. In fact, that's the place you should least have confidence. Okay? The real confidence comes from somewhere else, but not in the sense of confidence that I've got it down. That will kill you every time.
But there are certain things that.
Yeah, you know how to make a salad.
No.
That's fine.
She actually does.
Okay? I mean, I think most people do, actually.
No, but I can't coffee. Like if you meet a tzaddik, like there's things that are they're like black and white for him. Like you do see like a rebbe like gives off this. There are certain things that are just obvious. They just are. They don't.
They're obvious because he's open to hearing them. They're not obvious because it's a rule of thumb and he's repeating it every single time.
No, but you will see certain things that are, it is this way, and it's a running theme, and if you ask him the same question every day about every situation, he will always say the same.
No. Hashem is good. That's maybe the only thing that is constant.
Fine, that's okay.
Hashem created the world, He gave me the Torah. That's what's constant. In terms of my relating to another human being, and in fact,
a mitzvah is good,
and even more than that, when I say Shema every day, it says, it has to be new to you. You can't repeat the same thing again. If you're repeating the same thing again, you missed the whole point. I'm not saying every person can do it at this level, but Dafka, the example that you gave of a Rebbe, a real Rebbe is somebody who every single moment hears Hashem talking to him. And he hears that this is something new. It's called Chayei Sha'ah as opposed to Chayei Olam. Which one is better? The temporary or the eternal? So the whole point of a Rebbe is somebody who hears the temporary, the temporal, Chayei Sha'ah, every single moment. And he hears it all the time. It's like a Navi. What is Hashem saying now? And in fact, like the Rambam Paskins, if a Navi tells you, except for one thing you're not allowed to do, he tells you to be mevatel, any mitzvah, even lo ta'aseh, certainly a nasi. But even in lo ta'aseh, except for avodah zarah, you have to listen to him. Why? Because for a moment it could be that Hashem is saying, no, this is not what why? Because it overrides this constancy, this consistency.
That's what I'm saying. We don't really experience that.
But when it says that we will all be prophets, what it means is that from the life experience, that's where you will hear Hashem speaking to you. And that's where it has to come in. I can't meet today's challenges the way I met yesterday's, because they have a different meaning. Hashem wants me to go to a new place. That's to give a person, I think, that's different than just listening to them. Because for most people, you have to do work to get to this place where they're willing to hear the question as the answer, or at least the beginning of the answer, the opening to the answer. It's very different than just letting them speak, and listen.
No, it's being very present, very active with them. But I'm saying
and very active in the sense of convincing them, or at least trying to help them get to this point where they can hear that Hashem is speaking to them all the time. And if you're just going back, repeating the same, let's say in relationships between two people, if you keep repeating the same argument again and again and again and again, what are you? You're Ovid of Avodah Zarah, that's what you are. Because you take your life as if it's some kind of, was etched in some sapphire and given as luchos abris. It's not. Your life is constantly changing. You can't use the same argument again and again. Every time it has to be something new. You can have new arguments.
I don't feel like
old ones.
rabbis do that.
Say them. We're not teaching. I'm not teaching you to be a rabbi.
No, but I'm saying a real rav should be able to paskin like that or
But
explore.
look, all the good stories that we have about tzaddikim, all the good stories are surprising.
Right.
It's the element of surprise that gets you.
Today, they don't surprise
Say
you.
them,
They don't even give you the time to express.
Because they're talking about halacha. Halacha is very consistent.
But it's not, because it's built on this sea of God's word. At the end of the day, it needs
Say
to
them,
be
but again, it's God's word, but in many ways it's devoid of that ability to hear Hashem. Again, it's Hashem, what Hashem spoke.
Then what's a
but,
messianic world if halacha can't be fluid?
It says nobody will teach one another how to serve Hashem, because everybody will know me from the smallest to the biggest.
We shouldn't ask rabbis questions.
No, because you're not there yet. When you're there, we'll talk about it.
When you're there.
But what I'm saying is that in terms of psychology, in terms of people's psyche, it's not a question of whether we're there or not. Other things don't work. Meaning, if I go by a textbook, that's what the problem with the DSM. And if I go and I use some guidebook to tell me how to diagnose and then what to do, well, DSM doesn't say so much what to do, but at least it helps me diagnose. I'm in trouble, because what are you telling me? That everything is set in stone, and now go make something alive out of a person's suffering. No, you're just suffering from A, B, C, and D, and for this we give this, for this we give this. That's it. Go home. So what am I suffering for? So that I could pay more money to the pharmacy to get some psychoactive drugs. What's the good of that? That's not an approach to psychology. That's an approach. That's what's called psychiatry. It's turning it into some kind of. Okay.
But on the other hand, it's very unsettling for people to not have a diagnosis and to not have something compartmentalized.
Mm-hmm.
And when something is not compartmentalized, it's scary.
That's why it's called fear.
Yeah.
That's why we call it yira.
It's very scary
Right.
for the person, and it's scary for the people around
Mm-hmm.
to not understand what exactly is going on. Because okay, you have a strep throat, you know what to do. Okay, you have whatever, you know what to
At
do.
least they tell you.
There's an order.
Somebody tells you what it is and what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
But what can you do? That about the things that really matter to your life, nobody in the world can tell you what it is or what to do about it. And that's the most difficult thing to come to terms with.
Scary fact.
So the only thing that you can come to a really wise person, like Elihu here is, and he says, you have to talk to Hashem. You have to figure it out for yourself. I can help you. I can tell you what I think is a dead end, what I don't think is working, because I'm looking at it from the side and I'm seeing it objectively.
Somebody that is really understanding it.
No, but in the end, the most important thing is that in the end, you do come to a new stage. That's what we said. That when you read Eov on Shavuos, he starts out great and he ends up even greater. What you don't hear is how did he get from great to greater. On Shavuos, we don't want you to hear the whole story. But the truth is that he had to go through tremendous calamity and suffering. Okay, so now why? Why? Okay, so let's get into the thick of this book and what's going on. So I told you I love the King James. So everybody who hates the King James and thinks I'm an apicorus for loving it has got a problem. But I do love it. I think that there's never been a translation like this into English, and if somebody can ever do something like this that's Jewish, then he will have won his world and his world to come. Okay. There was a man in the land of Ut, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. How is the word God in the King James? God is Elokim, and Lord is Yud Kei Vav Kei, or Aleph Daled Nun Yud. That's one of the things that they differentiate very clearly, which is not so differentiated in other versions. And even when I translate, I don't differentiate because most of the time there's no reason to. But here there's a lot of reason to. So when it says that he fears God, he's God-fearing. Who's he fearing?
God of nature.
Elohim. And we'll see which God this is. By the way, the Malbim builds his whole commentary based on this observation. You'll see that there's a lot more proof for this observation as we go on. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. Everything's very nice. He's got 7 midos and 3, here you see that the women are the moichin and the men are the midos. His substance also was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels. So here you see the camels are smart and sheep are full of emotion. And 500 yoke of oxen and 500 she-asses in a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the East. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day. Each one had a day where he would feast and invite everybody else. And sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them. Right? He wanted them to be sanctified. He was very careful. And rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. Okay? So this description would fit 1,000% any idol worshiper in India. This is exactly how somebody who worships idols feels. There's no difference. Just because it says God here, Elohim is the idols. Who in the world says here that this man is God-fearing in the way that Moshe Rabbeinu taught me what God-fearing is? It doesn't say anything like that.
1 second.
He's a man from the east. Uts is apparently somewhere near India also. And what is it? What kind of a person? He's God-fearing. Have you been with an Indian cab driver? Of course, everybody has. Are they God-fearing or not God-fearing? They're more God-fearing than I am.
Yeah,
He's 100, except for the way they drive. There you see that they're apparently not. God, it doesn't include traffic. But other than that, when I talk to them, they're more God-fearing than I am, without a doubt.
And they're very, very afraid of
Okay.
those sons.
Okay? They're afraid of everything. Everything is a reason to fear. What are the?
Which God? Which God? What do you mean?
Doesn't matter.
Serving to what do you mean? It doesn't matter.
They have 1,000 gods.
I pray every day
There's the
to
God.
idol, or I
There's
pray
the
to-
God of gravitation. There's the God of this. There's the God of everything has a God.
So what if he was sacrificing to one Hashem, the one Avram?
Maybe, but he's still God-fearing in the sense of there are laws of nature. One of those laws is be careful not to blaspheme God, whichever God you mean, or the one about, doesn't matter. It's a law of nature. It's not a commandment. We figured out over time that you have to be very careful with these idols. We figured out over time that you shouldn't, God forbid, they say God, they don't say, their names, I don't want to say them, names of Avodah Zarah, but they don't say this or that. Maybe between themselves they do, because I'm going to this temple or going to that temple. They have to know which one they're going to. But when they talk to you, they say God. And they mean God. And there's like the famous question, who's your God? It's the question that they ask each other. Who's your God? And it changes from time to time, because now I'm worshiping this, now I'm worshiping that, because this is...
You can ask the question about you, you can ask about any of us in this room. Which God are you?
100%.
Okay, so
100%.
why is this unique? I mean, maybe none of us are serving the right Hashem.
No. You also have a concept of something else, as we've talked about it. You have Moshe Rabbeinu. You have Moshe Rabbeinu who tells you that Hashem, you had Matan Torah, that Hashem is far beyond anything I can understand. Here, these are gods that are imminent in your life. They're here. These are forces you have to reckon with every single day. That's what he means by God. Okay, to say it more clearly, in their time, this was called astrology. There's a book that's supposed to come out, God willing, should come out soon. I brought a quote from one of the biggest scholars of astrology, somebody by the name of Lynn Thorndike. Is a researcher in the United States in the early 20th century. So the quote I brought was because it's really, it captures for me the problem that we have with astrology, because we think astrology is something that's like in the paper or like in the, next to the funnies or something like that. And he brings there that people cannot understand the hold that astrology had over the primitive mind. It's a hold in the same way that the bank has over us. Okay? That everything is about the money flow. It was at that level. If you, God forbid, exactly that was the idea, do something against these natural laws of how the universe functions, and they're governed by the stars and the planets and the constellations and how they all connect, you will be hurt. It's a law of nature. It's not recompense. It's not he's going to take revenge on you. It's immediate and it's abrupt and it's hard. That's the way it is. You can't go against nature. In the same way that we understand that I can't jump off the balcony because there is a law of gravitation. I can't go against it. Astrology had a complete grip on people's attitude towards their lives. And Eov, says the Malbim, and you'll see in a moment, that's how he lives. That's his God.
Is there a time period for this?
Yes, it says that apparently it was in the time of Avram. If it was ever, it was in the time of Avram Avinu.
It's not actually.
Okay. Chazal also say that it's maybe just a mashal. But in any case, everybody agrees that it was written in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Did Moshe Rabbeinu himself write it or somebody else?
But if it took place in the time of Avram, meaning after Avram? Like
No, in Avram's time.
Avram had already found this God?
Perhaps.
Okay. Did he know
That's not
Avram?
clear. It seems that Elihu ben Brachel knows this God. So either he's a disciple of Avram who comes to Eov, or he's also maybe Avram himself. Okay. So now we have this whole thing happening with Eov, that behind the scenes there's a real Shamayim, there's a real Hashem, there's a real God, the Creator, and He's going to test him. Why does Hashem test people? Why is Hashem willing to test people?
To unleash their potential.
To help us to grow.
Okay. He said, I don't want to leave him in this place where he imagines that he's got it figured out. And because he imagines that he's got it figured out, it says here, and this is the sin. What does it say? Thus did Job continually. Kacha yaseh Eov kol hayamim. It never changes. That's it. In the time, we've talked about this in the past, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, Yirmiyahu cries out in so many words, you've got Hashem by the beard. Okay? You caught him. He's in your trap. You've got him exactly where you want him. You've got the Beis HaMikdash, you've got the Korbanos, you've got the service that you do every day, and Hashem is tied down, he can't move, you got him right where you want him. He's got to answer all your prayers. He's got to do everything you want. You are now God. Why? Because you control God. How do you control him? Through your service. Kacha yaseh Eov kol hayamim. I've got it down. I know how to function here. I know how to run the world myself. I don't need Hashem. Hashem is just a disturbance, really. You pacify him like you pacify a baby. You stick.
Purpose is only just to keep us moving forward.
Again, Hashem's purpose, and that's exactly what they meant by opium of the masses, Hashem's purpose is to provide me with a philosophy that will allow me to feel that the world makes sense. And here it is. So says Hashem. You can't stay there.
That's his purpose, because it says...
Because that's what he's doing. He's making sure that Hashem continue to provide for him. How? That every time that they have a feast, he tells them, he sanctifies them. He says, what does sanctify? Go to India, you'll see what it means to sanctify. You take some water from the Ganges and you throw it on people. You sanctify them. What do you do after that? You make sure that you bring a burnt offering. If God forbid they did blaspheme Hashem, they said the wrong word because they were drunk, because of this, whatever it was. So we got to take care of all the contingencies. Okay, everything's covered now. Everything's fine. What
if he had thought that God was here to push him to do his mission?
That's either he comes to that realization or not. I don't know if anybody in this book comes to that realization. When I say that, I come from a perspective that's much more mature and older.
Isn't that also walking in God?
What?
Isn't that also walking in God?
No,
Why?
because here I'm saying that that's not the only purpose. There are other people out here. Maybe it's for me to be a surrogate for something else that's going on. I don't know. In the end, but whatever.
In an element that God is here to push me on my mission.
No, I'm saying that God is talking to me all the time. Okay? I'm not necessarily saying that maybe it is retribution for something. Okay? I don't know. But it's a conversation. It's not static. The whole problem with idolatry is that you've got it down. And Hashem can turn into idolatry as well. The Beis HaMikdash can turn into a vessel of idolatry. Why? Because here we have the service, we know how to control him. Again, taking it out of the religious context makes a lot more sense. It just says that people become stagnant. And they only want to live the same life that they can have, and it's working, and why would I, God forbid, want anything to happen? So they touch wood, and they do this, and they do that, and whatever it is, whatever goes through people's minds, how do I keep it going the same way? Instead of understanding that it's a conversation. It's not always a pleasant one, but it's always a meaningful one. Meaningful in the sense of challenging maybe what I think is true or not true. Okay. So, how does this test occur? It's very interesting. Hashem doesn't think it up. The way that the book of Job presents it, it's not that Hashem thought it up. It's almost like saying Hashem doesn't have a problem with this. Hashem is fine. So let's see. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before, here we have Havaya, the Lord. And Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? That's what I love about the King James. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and excuseth evil. I can't even say it. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for naught? And what is this fear of God? Hast thou not made an hedge about him and about his house, meaning you protect him, and about all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Why is he fearful? He has what to lose. You've given him. He's upright. By the way, is ever the word love mentioned here? No. Because to love God is already to do it for a different reason. Not because I'm afraid of losing something. You might say that the love is a consequence of the fear. That really, at first I have to fear, and then when I fear, I can begin to love. But we'll see that in another opportunity, not right now. So the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. So he says to him, okay, Mr. Satan, you can do anything you want to his possessions. Possessions includes children, includes everything that's alive, his livestock, but don't touch him himself. So, in a modern sense, who is this Satan? A modern sense, I mean not a modern sense, okay? A modern Jewish sense. Who's this? Who is this? Who is this guy?
Well, the world's calamity.
Oh. In the modern sense, in the Hasidic sense, who is this? What, there's another force out there? It's me. It's my Yetzer. What does my Yetzer say to me? What does it say about me? I'm wonderful. There's nobody like me anywhere.
I understand. Satan's not saying he's wonderful.
Yeah, he is. Hashem is saying, Ken, and Satan says, yeah, you want to test him, let's see. But this is all a conversation that's happening with Satan.
The Satan is
Ken.
not on the upside.
Again, it's a conversation with Satan himself. It's a conversation inside the person himself.
But the ego says, I'm amazing.
Okay.
This is saying, you're not so pure.
Okay.
That's your Satan.
That's
And
it.
Satan says you're not so pure.
No, your Satan is your ego. That's
He is your ego, and he's having both sides of the conversation now. He's having a conversation with Hashem.
Are you pure? Are you not?
Okay, you're pure, you're not pure. What's the topic? Me. What am I? What are the two options? The one side says either I'm the best in the world, or the other side says it's all fake. That's how the ego functions. That's the Yetzer Hara. That's what he does. That's the nefesh behemoth. What it has, all it's concerned with. Okay, he says there's this whole world out here. Seder. It's a part here. It says a Yudke Vavke is Yetzer Atov veYetzer Hara. It's Rashi Tavot. It's both. I think Hashem doesn't. He includes everything. It's a conversation inside the person himself that is asking about himself. He's doubting himself, you could say, but on the other hand, he's also aggrandizing himself. Those are the two sides. That's how we've always learned. The two sides of the Yetzer Hara. He will either aggrandize you until there's nobody like you, and those are the people that are full of ego in the sense of being better than everybody else, or he's going to put you down like nobody else, and that's the person who's in despair.
The Yetzer HaTov is the one that aggrandizes?
No. It's all the...
You said Yetzer HaTov, Yetzer Hara.
Even Yudke Vavke includes the Yetzer Hara.
Fine, but where's the Yetzer HaTov in this picture? You here?
No, he's not here yet. There's no yet answer about who the Yetzer HaTov is. The only possibility is, it's in the end where he says, okay, test him. That may be the beginning of the Yetzer HaTov.
But maybe
At the end, when Hashem says, okay, go and do whatever you want to him, let's figure out which it is. It's almost saying like the Nefesh Elokit is not afraid of the challenge. Okay, so let's see where it stands. So that part could be Yetzer HaTov already. That part could already be something positive. But this whole conversation is going on inside the person's animal soul.
it's a good thing though.
That's where it starts from. That's where it starts from.
Careful conversation.
Right. That's what I said. That's how it starts. That you begin to think about yourself. You think about yourself too much, you'll come to these questions: am I the best or am I the worst? Eventually, you'll come to this dichotomy: where do I stand? That is the worst question in the world to ask. Why? If you're really sincere with Hashem, it doesn't matter where I stand. It matters what I'm doing right now. It matters, you can ask yourself, am I doing the best I can? Yes. But that's not about who I am. That's not a picture of who I am. It's a question about how I'm doing things. Am I doing things to the best of my ability? One of the most difficult things for people to admit, when it comes to money, they can admit it pretty easily, but when it comes to everything else, they can't, which is, I could have done better. I can always do better. This is the best davening I had, what I did this morning? No, this is much better. And I have to do tshuva for it. That's what it means to do tshuva. It's not to doubt myself, but to doubt my actions. Can I do more? Can I do it with more intent? Can I do it with more meaning? But myself, who cares? Hashem will judge in the end. Is it like this or like that? But that's not for me. That whole thing of, okay, you get the point. So what happened? There was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. Everything was nice and dandy. And the Sabians, right, the Shvaim, these people from Shva, like Malkat Shva, same neighborhood, fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I am only I am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, so that was the first servant that came in. Right, here it says there came a messenger. In Hebrew it's malach. When it's a malach, so you already understand that it could be I don't know if you remember the classes about Yosef that we took from that, and we said that this is also, you can learn from Yosef what happens to a victim of trauma. So here, you can also interpret this as being entirely an internal conversation inside of himself. None of this actually happened. Right? Imagine for a moment that nothing here actually happened. It's all a description of a person's inner world. You couldn't understand this until maybe Lacan or anybody like that, but there are books that are written like this. So what's his name? Philip something. The guy who he really loves writing like that. That then you find out, Philip Dick, he has a lot of science fiction that's like that. You find out that everything that was going on never actually happened. It's all in the person's head. Another example is the story of Pi, which is another thing that you don't know which is it. I think we talked about it back then when we talked about Yosef. Did this actually happen? Or is it his interpretation of the events because he couldn't handle what was happening? But here you have, Mamish, could be this whole story, everything is happening in his head. And that's like what happens in Shavuot, so you sort of take everything out. This all never happened. By the way, that's one of the things the Gemara says like this, that Yesh Omrim Mashal Haya, that there is an opinion that it happened in the time of Avram, and there's an opinion that the whole thing is a parable. So if it's a parable, that's exactly what's going on here. It's not talking about events that actually happened, it's a parable for what happens in a person's head. Then now he imagines that everything's gone.
But we don't actually grow from inner conversations. We grow from actually living whatever it is.
Right.
So we're speaking.
Right.
Like it doesn't really matter.
Right. Except that.
A little bit, but when
except if you're psychotic.
What?
Except if you're psychotic. If you're psychotic, none of this has to happen. Like a schizophrenic, none of it has to happen.
You're saying they can genuinely grow even if
Right.
grow and heal, or you're saying
In a certain sense, right, that the fantasy life becomes real. That you can't differentiate.
Growing and healing and expanding.
So somebody would say, so why am I going through this?
Right. Okay. Fine.
Because
It's their trauma. Yeah.
because for you that is reality.
Right.
Why is somebody could say, why is that more real? Why is the world that you and I think is on the outside more real than the world that's happening inside their head? Just because his brain is wired different than mine? Most of our brains are wired so that what's real is what's on the outside. But if somebody's brain is wired, the what's real is on the inside.
So the question, what's normal?
Okay. For them, that's what it is. So what do you want to do now? You want to tell them you're crazy? So maybe you are crazy, but it doesn't help them. So I have to find a way to grow from those experiences. I have to learn, the person has to learn how to cope with what's inside rather than what's on the outside. He has to also learn how to differentiate between the inside and the outside in the same way that we do. Okay? Except for us, it's the other way around.
If you psychotic episode, then it's interesting. And then your point stands. Fine.
So, or it's just a mashal, it's a parable, and saying that this is what goes on. To say it another way, what I think, if you explain this as something that's happening inside the person, you go in the direction of what has meaning, and basically what he's seeing is that everything falls away. That's what I said about asceticism. My children don't give me meaning. My livestock doesn't give me meaning. Nothing that I have gives me. None of my possessions can give me meaning. This is like if you want the answer to consumerism, which is it doesn't matter how much you have. Meaning you won't get from it. But thankfully he survives this stage. So we'll skip everything. Everything is lost. And then Job arose in verse 20 and rent his mantle and shaved his head, because he is mourning, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. What do you do when a calamity happens? If you're a God-fearing idolater, you worship God. What do you understand? That what? You must have done something wrong. Or, as much as I gave these burnt offerings, it wasn't enough. Because my children, my livestock, my who knows what, was doing something behind my back, and I didn't know about it, but there's a reason for it, and therefore I worship. And said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. He didn't complain. Why? Because he understood there is a reason for it. And even if the reason is that you come out of the womb without anything, you return without anything. Even if that's the nature of the world, that you can't take anything with you. You see how anti-Jewish this is. You can't take anything with you. What are you talking about? Of course you take with you. Torah u'masim tovim. You take a lot. But that you can't reach without fear of Hashem. You can't come to that stage. Again, the giving of the Torah, if you don't have vayira ha'am me'od v'yichrad kol ha'am asher b'machaneh. You can't come to receiving the Torah until you understand that you don't understand.
This could be interpreted like that he's a tzaddik also.
100%.
Saying, like, it sounds like
I'm going by the Malbim now. It says very clearly, and you'll see in a moment that he can't understand it as a tzaddik. You'll see in a second that he's at least an astrologer. Okay, if you want, you could even say that he's the example of where idolatry leads. Because idolatry, by the Rambam, idolatry is a more developed version of astrology. That's all. You can say that it's sort of like the difference between a personal computer and a cell phone. And a personal computer is heavy, sticks put in one place. That's how astrology was. You have to go at night, and you have these temples that you look at the stars from. Idols are handheld devices. You hold in your hand, serves the same purpose. That's how the Rambam sees it. It's a development, it's a technology. Basically, idolatry was a technology. Idolatry in the sense of idols, physical idols, was an advancement over astrology. So now, it doesn't end there with possessions. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? Where did you come from? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth and from walking up and down in it. By the way, this is one of the classic examples of what happens with the Nefesh Behemoth, which is, I've been everywhere, I've seen everything, and you know what the only thing that's interesting is?
Brings to sin.
Me. Okay, where have you been? Been everywhere. Let's talk about me. Okay. There's so many people out there, there's so many things going on, but the important thing is me. So he says, as thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast his integrity. And now, not only is he all the good things he was before, he's also Baal Nava, right? The guy who wants to get a shidduch and is told by his now his resume just got longer. He's done. He's even gone through this. Although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Okay, and you wanted me to test him, and there's no real reason for it. You see, he's adamant, he's a tzaddik, so on. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. That's a pasuk that the Tanya uses in completely different context. He says, O be'ado, kol asher le'ish yiten be'ad nafsho, be'ad chayav. That from this we learn that you're allowed to give all your possessions to tzedakah if you want to save your life, okay, if you want to do tshuva. So, in any case, he says, in the end, a person cares for his body more than he cares for his possessions. This is one of the sources of bechol me'odecha being bechol mamuncha, that there are people for whom possessions or money is more important than their lives. Oh, sorry. It's the opposite. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Don't touch his life. Keep him alive. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. So now, he's really got it. Then said his wife unto him, who's his wife? If I would interpret it psychologically, who's the wife here? Let's see what she says. Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die.
The alteration.
The what?
The alteration.
It's our mind.
The what?
The other part of his mind.
Which one?
The
voice
Nefesh
of-
Elokes.
Intellect.
The Nefesh Elokit would tell him to curse God and
No,
die?
no.
The sensible one, like, what's that?
Your intellect will tell you to do that.
Logic. No?
Okay. You're saying like the Nefesh Sichlit, like the intellect. Well, let's see in a second what she said. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaks. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Aye, with his lips, say the Chazal, he didn't sin, but in his heart already he was cursing God. I mean, he didn't believe anymore in his idols, or he didn't believe anymore in his ability to control reality. He had given up on it. But still he didn't curse them. So who is she? So I think like usually you have to go further down into the physical, because he was hurt physically here. So I connected more with the nefesh tivit, with the natural soul. Natural soul being the stage between, or the level between the animal soul and the body itself. It's the part that already says, enough is enough, I can't take the suffering. And it has deep despair over the possibility of becoming well again. And there is such a thing that the body breaks down. It doesn't want to hear anymore about keep going. Enough is enough. Okay. So now we'll come to the Malbim's main point, and the main point that we're making. We'll skip a little. So these three friends come to him, and they sit with him, and they wait for him to speak. For 7 days and 7 nights, they don't say a word. They wait for him to open his mouth. So 3:1. After this opened Job his mouth, and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man child conceived. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. As for that night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined unto the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. What does he want?
So you raise and
What's wrong with the day? What do you want from the day? That's pure astrology. Meaning that my whole existence depends on the hour of my birth. And on the day, the omen of my birth, the constellations as they were. Again, this is not, you have to understand, if this was written in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, for instance, so he doesn't mean what they called later in the 3rd century before, BCE, they called a birth map. It's not something that complex, but it's about the day. That day, I don't need the whole picture here, exactly what was where and what. That day is cursed. And that day shouldn't be counted as part of the calendar. Throw it out. What is the day? It's a day of klala. Like what? Like what Jews should have said about which day of the year? What day of the year would we like to strike out of the calendar? Tisha B'Av. Why don't we? Because Mashiach will also be born on that day. Okay? That thing that you think is such a calamity, in the end, is the greatest opening and gateway to growth. And so, but he says, no, strike it out. I don't want it on the calendar. Forget about this day. The night also. And then he has a tirade, a whole chapter, going against the day. What do you want for the day? That's the classic thinking of an idolater astrologer. Everything is based on predetermined rules of nature that have to do with when I was born, where I was born, how I was born, and so on and so forth. Okay? And even when the sages accept some of this as natural tendencies, they also say, Ein mazal Yisrael. In the Pshat, Ein mazal Yisrael. There is no mazal. You don't have to take it seriously. Or like the Baal Shem Tov says, Ein mazal Yisrael. There really we do have a mazal, and it's the Ein itself. How do you get to the Ein? Through the Yira. That's how you can, Chokhmah me Ein timatzeh. The Yira leads to Chokhmah, and the Chokhmah itself is the Ein. It is the state of nothingness that's beyond all my knowledge. Okay, so what do these three companions answer? They basically tell him, we won't do it today, but they basically tell him, look, you're wrong. You must have sinned. Nature is not wrong. Idols are not wrong. Astrology is not wrong. It's you that made a mistake. What are they doing? They're locking him back into the same narrative and same set of rules that Hashem is trying to get him to escape. Yeah. They're locking him into that.
Bad friends.
Bad friends in the sense of this is what they know.
That's all they know.
Bad therapists. Okay.
But
As a
they're
bad therapist,
Yeah.
right? A bad therapist is somebody who says, in this case,
It shouldn't
well,
happen to you.
you're right. I'm your advocate, therefore I have to tell you you're right. It shouldn't have happened. Next time, do this and this and this, and it won't happen. No, that's I don't know how to solve this. There's no simple solution to this. I know the answer. Okay? The bad therapist, I know the answer. I know exactly what the answer is. You must have forgotten to put incense yesterday, right? Tell me the truth. You said to your wife this sentence, didn't you? That's the reason for it. And so on. I already know. It says here in the book. This is what you're suffering from. I already know. Now, I'm making a caricature. No, nobody says like that. But the overriding feeling is that in the end, there's nothing new. Nothing new is going to happen here. We just have to find a way to make it work for you. We have to find a way to make things function again. And we'll find it. It'll take time. We'll find it.
I'll accommodate you.
So these three men cease to answer Job. At some point, he gets tired of them, and he says, I can't accept your answers. I didn't do anything wrong. Again, what does it mean, I didn't do anything wrong? He's not saying I'm a tzaddik. I did everything that the rule book, that the idol word book and astrology rule book say to do. I did everything the way it should be done. So I'm not at fault. So tell me now why I'm suffering. So these three men cease to answer Job. In their world, there's no answer now. Because he was righteous in his own eyes. He was righteous. He did everything he should have done. There wasn't a piece of incense he didn't do in the right place at the right time. Then was kindled the wrath of Elihu, the son of Brachel, the Buzite of the kindred of Ram, against Job. Here it says, even Chazal explained, kindred of Ram is Avram. So he's from the converts that Avram made. Okay. Against Job was his wrath kindled because he justified himself rather than God. But how can you justify God if he did everything right? So maybe it sounds exactly the same. Maybe you just missed something. And God is still right, meaning the natural laws are still right. But here, let's see what he says. Also against his three friends was his wrath kindled because they had found no answer and yet had condemned Job. Now Elihu had waited till Job had spoken because they were elder than he. When Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, then his wrath was kindled. And Elihu, the son of Brachel, the Buzite, answered and said, I am young, and you are very old. Again, this is the wisdom that comes from experience. Wherefore I was afraid, and durst not show you mine opinion. I said, days should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. Here it says it explicitly. This is the wisdom that we're talking about. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth them understanding. Something else that we've not met until now. A spirit in man. This is not the intellect. There's something else. Great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. It won't help you to live 1,000 years to understand judgment. Then the Lord, so he goes through a whole thing of explaining that you can't know. He places Yov in the question of what actually happened here. And he doesn't give him an answer. His answer is, I don't know. And the answer is, you also don't know. We'll see more of it as we develop. This is not today, obviously. Finally, the book ends with Hashem appearing, Hashem giving it the final answer. And then exactly like you would expect Hashem to give an answer, it sounds pretty strong. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee and answer thou me. Meaning, now I'm going to ask the questions, you answer me. What are the questions? Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, or hast stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof? And so on and so forth. And question after question. He says, let's not even talk yet about human relationships and judgment. Just tell me about this nature that you think you understand. You think you've got nature down. You think you've got me as nature down. Even that you don't begin to understand. And he goes on and on and on. And I don't want to get into now. We'll just do the very end. In chapter 40. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer it. Meaning he says, you're coming to me with tinus, with complaints? You don't begin to understand what you're talking about. So what are your complaints? Can you reprove me? If you can reprove me, so you answer all these questions. Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? He finally comes to this place of not that I don't know why this was done to me. That he didn't know until now either. But he comes suddenly to an understanding that it's not that he doesn't know what happened to him. It's that he doesn't understand Hashem. That's the main thing. That's the place that he's now changed. I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. So I spoke and I spoke and I spoke, but now I understand that silence is the only answer here, because the silence here is not a silence of complacency. It's a silence of the unknown. Vayidom alon, I have no answer. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind and said, why is this coming again? Gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee and declare thou unto me. Will thou also disannul my judgment? So you've come to this understanding, you don't understand nature, you don't understand Hashem. Now, do you still want to annul my judgment? Will thou condemn me that thou mayest be righteous? Do you want it to be in the end that you're right and I'm wrong? Or are you right? You did everything you needed to do. You're right. But I'm also right. Why? Because beyond everything that you think is right is something much bigger. That was right for then, but now it's something else entirely. Hast thou an arm like God, or canst thou thunder with a voice like him? Deck thyself now with majesty and excellency, and array thyself with glory and beauty. Cast abroad the rage of thy wrath, and behold every one that is proud and abase him. Look on every one that is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together, and bind their faces in secret. Then will I also confess unto thee that thine own right hand can save thee. What's the takeaway message? You can save yourself. How? Just by accepting the lowliness here. The lowliness of your own existence. And not only that you're not afraid to teach others about their own loneliness. You don't say it to somebody, you're lowly and this and so, but teach it. And when you teach it, you'll see that that's what saves you. It's an incredible thing. We're going to have to look at these words a lot more in detail. Okay? But we need to end. So it's 12 o'clock. So the first message here is that here we have a case of somebody who knows why everything is happening, and they're finally confounded. They don't know why things are happening. And Hashem comes in the end and says, that realization that you're lowly, that you don't know, that's what's going to save you. That ability to come and say that, to come and admit that to yourself. that admittance, when a person is willing to say, I don't know, and not only do I not know, but even if I did everything right, in the eyes of Hashem, it's still not. There's something beyond this rightness that I have, this righteousness that I'm clinging on to so strongly. Again, it's the feeling of
Humility, no?
again, I have to phrase this exactly. It's not that I come and tell you, again, I'm the advocate. It's not that the therapist comes and says, you're all wrong in what you did. That's not it. Because that's not going to help the person know. He's right according to what he had in mind. He was right. But it counts for nothing right now. You're beyond that now. You have to go beyond that. Understand that the next stage is going to open up when you can admit, not that you weren't right, but it has no relevance to now. Simply has no relevance. We're not saying that Eov was a terrible person at all. In the worldview that he had, in the picture of reality that he had, he was fine. He was doing everything right. But Hashem says, if you want to come to the next stage, you have to understand that rightness is not relevant anymore. I'll give you an example how that plays out. If you continue to do classical mechanics forever, you'll never come to quantum mechanics. It's not that classical mechanics is wrong. It's fine. It's right. But you're in a different place now. You can do bigger and better things. Same thing with understanding Torah. It's not that what I learned when I was 5 or 6 is wrong. It's not that how I acted was wrong. Again, I'm an advocate. I say, Seder, even l'shitatcha, even you're right. What you did the best you could. But now we're in a different playing field.
Time to graduate.
Okay? And here, those things, not that they're wrong, they're not relevant anymore. They were good for their time, they're not good for now anymore. And life is constantly moving through that growth pattern, not being afraid to say that what I achieved before is not to my merit anymore. I can't take credit for it anymore. It belongs to you, Hashem. When I come to that point, he says, then will I also confess unto thee that thine own right hand can save thee. When you can do that, Hashem's not joking with him here. He's saying the truth. No, Eov's. Your own right hand. No, Hashem says to Eov, when you can confess, meaning when you can admit to yourself that all the goodness that I've done, all the right things that I've done, they're not to my merit anymore. They're not relevant. Why? We're adding the answer that Eov can't hear yet, but it's saying Hashem did this. Okay, and all the goodness belongs to Hashem. When I can admit that, when I can stop taking credit for it, then you do receive power. Then you begin to understand that Hashem's power flows through your hand. But you can't do that as long as you're clinging on to all your past merits. You can't. It won't work. You're not going to move. You also won't understand the world at its higher level. Okay, so we'll leave it here for now. And God willing, we'll continue, I hope, after next Monday, after the Chag. As long as people keep coming. No pressure. No.
We can only bring ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, you can bring other people.
Is it a sin to get angry at God? Like to argue, to...
Is it a sin?
I'm saying, like, let's just say this is the process he went through, but in the end he...
It's a sin to curse God. But to argue... But to... No. Right. He cursed his day. Right. For him, that was God at that time.
Okay, it wasn't Hashem.
Right. For us, the Isra is to... להטיח דברים כלפי מעלה. It's like to blame. But there's definitely an openness to arguing.
Saying when a person is breaking and falling,
he has to argue.
Be in a sense of rage.
He has to cry out. He has to cry out. If he doesn't cry out, he's not normal.
Right.
How can you not cry out to Hashem?
Right, but sometimes that cry is not this perfect humble cry. It's rage. It has ego.
It's rage.
It has a lot of
Rage. Okay. That has to.
That's not the issue, really.
It's not the issue. It's the fact that he's appealing to Hashem,
Okay.
that he understands there's something higher than him. That's more important than exactly how he does it. Okay? As long as he still feels it, Hashem, because Hashem's not going to move because I cry like.
Arrogant and angry at God, you obviously.
Right. It's going to have to work itself out. You have to work yourself out, work the whole issue out. That rage and whatever it has to turn into submission, and that will take time. But at least it begins.
Action, that conversation is not necessarily sinful. It's part of the process.
How does that work?